Hello, and welcome to the Rennie Center's annual community conversation as part of its report on the condition of education in Massachusetts. My name is Chad D'Entremont, and I serve as the Rennie Center's executive director. Our mission is to ensure educational decision-making is based on deep knowledge and evidence of best practice, with a particular focus on Massachusetts. The Condition of Education Report, or COE as we like to call it, is our flagship effort in service of this cause. Each January, we set aside a week to connect, convene, and engage education leaders and the broader field in constructive discourse to drive systemic improvements in public education. Activities include the release of our data dashboard, a guide featuring recommendations for immediate action steps in the coming year, and a public event with the Massachusetts Secretary of Education and other key leaders. Included in this series of events is a conversation with community, school, and program leaders to highlight and listen to the perspectives of practitioners and ensure their experiences and expertise are central to any improvement strategies we promote. This year, our community conversation takes on added importance. The 2024 COE report focuses on rethinking education. In the months leading up to its release, we have been engaged with the field in a series of conversations on how we can rethink the fundamental resources, people, place, and time that undergird our education system. Beginning last spring with a forum on how to rethink the role of the teaching profession, extending to how we can rethink time in the early education and care and higher education spaces, and last November going out to Western Massachusetts and thinking about place and where learning happens. Our goals throughout all of this work and leading up to the release of our big report on January 30th is to not only respond to the current moment and the needs of communities and schools in recovering from the COVID pandemic, but to chart a long-term vision for reform. The past few years have made evident that far too many of the structures and approaches we still use in public schooling were developed over 100 years ago. What we need is a plan for the next century. At Rennie, this means asking essential questions that challenge the grammar of schooling, the grammar of education, and how we fundamentally define our approaches to teaching and learning. Asking essential questions, for example, like why are resources, courses of study, extracurricular activities, and opportunities available to students still largely determined by where they live and the school that they attend, especially when technology and the internet have broken down such artificial barriers in almost every other walk of life? Why do we still assume that each classroom has only one teacher and therefore each student one primary learning experience, like we're sitting in a one-room schoolhouse out on the prairie? And why do our notions of what's possible in education too often become limited with the basic assumption that core learning, that is what we think of as the most important time for learning, the school day, must happen at the same place and at the same time and with the same students learning the same material based on arbitrary criteria like their age? In asking these questions, what we're doing is searching for answers. And we're reaching out and engaging with those who are already doing the hard work of finding more innovative and effective solutions, models that we can build on to transform our system moving forward. That's what today's community conversation is all about, hearing from folks doing the work. And I am delighted to have such representatives with me today. So let's dive in. Our community panel includes Emma Pasquarella, classroom teacher in Holyoke Public Schools; Cameron Mendes-Moreau, senior manager of network and engagement at the Massachusetts Alliance for Early College; Magda Rodriguez, senior director of national strategy for Families First; and John Cusick, rethinking grading coordinator and the head of the English department at the Springfield International Charter School. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us. Really appreciate it. So it's a grand tradition at the Rennie Center is that we want to create space for you all to tell your own stories. So introductions and bios tend to be light, but that becomes our first question. And Magda, since we'll start at the beginning, perhaps in early ed, can I start with you? And will you share a little bit about who you are, what you've done, and the work that you're currently doing in the education space?
Well, thank you so much, Chad, for the invitation. So happy to be here. Yes, I can tell you a little bit about myself. I am originally from Colombia. I studied law in Colombia and came here at a young age, and I have my children at early age too. And even with my law degree in Colombia, just being an immigrant with limited English, I faced a lot of difficulties raising my two children and limited resources. Then I have the opportunity to work at the Mariman Academy in East Boston for 5 years. And that job really changed my mind in regards to family engagement and the role that parents play in education. I did more than 500 home visits over that time, and I really understood the struggles that the families are facing and the disconnection between families and teachers and administrators, and also the burden that the teachers have usually and administrators to try to do everything from teaching to connecting to families and to do all the work that they have to do. I have been with Families First for 12 years. I have been leading several projects, but currently we are doing a parent leadership initiative across the state, and it's really shifting the communities and the parents and engagement that the parents have with children. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm just can't wait to continue seeing that report and what we're going to do in the future.
Great. Well, appreciate you being here. I can't help but note that we're on a panel to discuss education, and you started by talking about families. It's in the title of your organization, something I hope we can dig into a little bit more fully as we go. Emma, let me come down to you. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your background and the work you're doing?
No, I'd love to. Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate being on this panel with everyone. So I became an educator in 2005. I was sort of late to arriving. I know a lot of teachers kind of go into this knowing their whole life they want to be a teacher, but I didn't realize that I wanted to until um, my last semester of undergrad. And so I was sort of late to that game. But I took a course called Multicultural Education in a Diverse Society that sort of just made me aware of how this is such a crucial role in society and in sort of breaking down injustices that have been a systemic problem for so long. And so I really wanted to work with young children, and started teaching in New York City and got my master's degree there, and tried to keep my focus on social justice work through building curriculum. I was fortunate to teach the beginning of my career in a setting where I could develop my own curriculum, and worked with other educators to sort of build from the ground up the kind of learning we wanted our young children to be doing. And from there, just sort of moved around and went to different schools, and realized that there was a turning point in my career once I had my own children, and realized how much of my success as an educator was due to the additional time that I put into the profession and how much of my own resources I was putting into the profession. And when I opted to then sort of shift that focus and time to my own children, that how much more difficult my job became. And so once they got a little older and I was, able to take more of that time again, realizing how deciding to use that time to sort of focus on the profession itself and pursuing opportunities to look at making the teaching career more sustainable, and working in sort of some of the conversations that the Rennie Center has held before, working with different organizations like Teach Plus, and pursuing some additional program degrees at UMass in Boston to try to sort of really look at the teaching profession and making it more sustainable for people, because it's such an important profession.
We're definitely in agreement on that. Thank you. John, let me come to you. I know you're also in a school setting, obviously. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I've been at my current school for 9 years. Before that, I worked at Cathedral, so private Catholic school. I worked Agawam, Southlake, so suburban schools. Now the school I'm at, Springfield International Charter School, is an inner city school that services the whole city. I spent my first 4 years there doing 8th grade English before moving up to the high school, which was a really cool experience because I got to see some of the kids I taught in 8th grade again in 10th grade, and then again in 11th grade, and then again as seniors. So I really got to see their journey over the course of several years. Last year, our school was one of 5 schools that were awarded a federal grant to rethink grading. The confines of that grant are pretty nebulous. They basically said, we want something different, do whatever you want, go for it. And we were in a unique position where we, as a school, were run by a for-profit management company for the first 25, 26 years. We became self-run 3 years ago. So we're kind of finding our own identity because the previous model was tests were the only grades that counted for kids, nothing else, no classwork, no homework, nothing. It was tests only. And then, we're a K-12 school and kind of establishing, well, what does that mean now? How are we assessing our kids? So it was a perfect time for this opportunity in rethinking grading. Year one, we threw a lot of things at the wall to kind of see what stuck as we realized we had to retrain our students how to be students because many of them very early on learned how to game the system. All I have to do is show up for the test and do well on that. There's about 3 tests a quarter or a semester. The final's worth like 75%. Not a lot of effort was being put in to the actual learning experience. Now that we can have things count, we get to look at things differently. So one of the things that we're looking at that we're having the most success with this year that we're focusing on is a pilot where we are focused on transferable skills, identifying them for the students and working with the kids to know what the skills are that are important, not just for school, but in life in general, such as collaboration, research, articulating knowledge, identifying those and giving them feedback on those skills and using the curriculum as more as the vehicle to kind of teach these kids the social skills of what they'll need to survive outside of a school setting. So that's kind of what I've been working on. And yeah.
Right. Well, a lot to dig into. We'll definitely be coming back. But before we do that, Cam, sorry to come to you last. We're sort of working our way through the education continuum, but do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and the work of your organization?
Of course. Thanks, Chad, again for the invite. So I'm Cam Mendes-Moreau. I'm the Senior Manager for Network and Engagement with the Massachusetts Alliance for Early College. Prior to joining the Alliance, I spent 4 years at the Boston Private Industry Council, where I was working on issues that impact, underserved youth. So primarily around disconnected youth and young adults, ages 16 to 24, and then also supporting students who dropped out of high school to get reconnected to their education. I spent 4 years at the PIC, really sort of learned a lot about how the education system in Massachusetts disadvantages some students at the benefit of others. And I came to the PIC really passionate about education, and I left really passionate about spending my career supporting the students who are sort of most underserved by the traditional education system. I then moved over to the Massachusetts Alliance for Early College, where I work with a team that supports the expansion of high quality early college in Massachusetts. Early college is a program of study where students take college courses during their regular high school day at no cost to themselves or their families, and they do so with embedded wraparound supports that make sure that students who might not typically go to college are the students who can benefit the most from the program. And we sort of seek to impact the field in a handful of ways. The first is coalition building, so bringing together supporters of the initiative around the expansion of high quality programs. Within that work, we also do a lot of work centering the voices of students. We run an early college student policy fellowship, which brings together a cohort of 12 students who learn curriculum in community organizing and coalition building, and then go out and advocate for the programs that they feel like has impacted and changed their lives. We also seek to impact the field through capacity building, so working with practitioners to improve the capacity of the field to support high quality programs. We also work on policy conditions to ensure that there's a funding and policy environment that's conducive to high quality programming, and then looking at innovation as well. So what are other states doing in the early college space that might be promising opportunities for Massachusetts, and then bringing those innovations here to the state and sort of working with programs on the ground to incubate those and get them off the ground. And I'm just really excited to hear all of your backgrounds. I think there's so much work that we need to do in Massachusetts to close equity gaps in particular, and make sure that the education system is delivering on its promise to students and families, and just excited to be part of this conversation.
Right. Thanks, Cam. So what I'm hoping we can do for the next few minutes is really dig in on the Rennie Center's Rethinking Education agenda. I'll sort of direct questions to help with conversation, but please, anyone, come off mute, weigh in. Love to hear all of your perspectives. When we talk about rethinking education at the Rennie Center, we're really trying to get to the root of where the essential resources that create the structures and opportunities for learning reside, meaning people, place, and time. And the reason why we're focusing on that is I don't think the issue is a lack of innovation in education. There's a lot happening. There's perhaps too much happening. The challenge is that a lot of those improvements or great ideas tend to remain with the school or the person who's doing it. And the system itself really struggles to change. So I think we need to sort of think bigger about how to change the infrastructure that allows that type of innovation to take place. And starting with people, in my mind, means starting with educators, means starting with practitioners, including that, of course, early educators. So I want to dig in there. Em, if I can come to you first, you were able to join us for our Rethinking the Teacher Role event last spring. And I'd just be curious if you have any reflections for that event, but much more importantly, how do you envision the role of the teacher? Or what are some of the ways we might think about changing it or better supporting it so teachers can be more successful in the field?
Yeah, I was so excited to be a part of that conversation earlier in the spring. And what struck me most was sort of the validation of that concept of how teaching as it is a very challenging, almost not sustainable position. You know, whether you're teaching in Massachusetts or in California, I have friends, you know, teaching all over the country who are saying the same things like, it's so much, I can't do this. And you know, but we're still doing it. And to see so many people coming together, not only recognizing that, but willing to throw these ideas together to sort of bring about systemic change was very exciting and very reassuring that this is sort of a fixable problem. So I think some of the ideas of, you know, there was representatives talking about the classrooms without walls. And so like bringing in experts from all over the place to, you know, zoom in with students in a classroom or in a different space. There are all these different ideas. And I think most important was that, you know, we were all here. There were so many people who were, you know, held positions of power hearing these things. And so I think that the ideas of just sort of restructuring the classroom setup, I think bringing in more community members to build on, you know, what our communities can offer our families. I think that that's incredibly important. Rethinking how many educators are in the room and how to then use multiple educators in a room, not only to support the learning of students, but to support these newer educators coming in. I think that's a huge part of some of the issues in education is that these teachers are prepared in traditional education programs for 4 years. And then at the very end of those years of study are then thrown into a student teaching situation where they're asked to recall things that happened many years ago in their learning experience, where having this hands-on experiences where students are, where teachers who are students at that point, you know, are coming in and really sort of seeing how this job is done and the nuts and bolts of everything. And so I think that one of the most powerful models that I heard during that time was that sort of more so than a team, but like a mentorship situation of classroom teaching. So I think that that was a really exciting thing to think about. I think that next hurdle is how do we make it not a one-off here and there, but how do we sort of pull these resources together? So I think that that's the question that I still have, that conversations like this, I hope, can continue to build that momentum of how do we make this a new system of education versus just a pilot school here and there.
Right. Thank you. And one of the things I heard you saying is how do we build bridges across elements of the system so they're not just these handoffs, which places the burden on the teacher to figure everything out. You go to a teacher preparation program, might be at a university, might be an alternative pathway, and then you end up in the school and you have to figure it all out again. I also appreciate the mention of Camps Without Walls. For anyone listening to this, go to the 2024 COE report. It's featured, but that is a program that takes lead teachers, highly qualified, vetted veteran teachers, and matches them to co-teach a curricular unit with teachers in another school that might be under-resourced. first, and can be a powerful way to both diversify the curriculum and strengthen professional supports. Sticking with the role of educators, Magda, let me come to you. And, because I don't want early education to be left out of this conversation. I don't want, when we say practitioner or educator, people think K-12 teacher. I think part of the issue here is redefining teacher, so it's about everybody who's involved in a child's learning. Can you share with us what you see as the role of the early educator? Because I think it's so powerful how at that level we put the development of the child first, as opposed to just academic learning. So how would you describe the role and responsibilities of the early educator, and what can we learn from that?
In regards to early childhood, and again, I'm bringing the parents' perspective and the family, which is something that you will hear about me. We always know that parents are the first teachers. And when you're thinking about people, you need to think about the role that parents play in education. They have so much power, they have so much knowledge, especially in those early years. And so first of all, for us to think about how parents and teachers and administrators can really work together and team up to create teams to support education for the students, especially early age, is so critical. And how to bring the community and the resources that families already had. When we think about parent leaders, and we have been hearing a lot about burnout, the capacity of agencies. We have been working with the Department of Early Education and Care for almost 3.5 years to pilot these trainings for parent leaders and supporting staff to build projects in their community. And we just recently got a preliminary research from a study that we created, and the agencies appreciate so much, the teachers appreciate so much the relationships and how much parents can bring to the table. However, the day is too long for them. So I think that's when you were talking about system, that's when we need to change the system, because teachers value the relationship with the parents and the communities, but they just don't have sometimes the time to do it at the level that they need to do. So I just think as we rethinking this, we really need to look at the role that parents play in supporting teachers and supporting school administrators, and the role that they play in education too.
Yeah, and part of me, I'm back to building bridges, but also, think about how can we ask some more fundamental questions like staggered schedules, right? Does everyone have to be at the same place at the same time, even among the faculty, right? So not everyone has that really long day, and the students can still be served for a length of time.
Absolutely, and for time is just, and again, I know that was in our, and I don't know if there's the question that you went ahead, but when we were talking about the question on time, there is sometimes a disconnection between the time that the parents need. Sometimes they work 8 hours plus 2 hours of driving, plus the hours leaving it, we're talking about 11 hours. And for the childcare provider, that's such a long day for them to be ready to do this. So we need to think about different hours, flexibility, something that we talked during that time.
Absolutely. Right. John, I'm curious about your experience, with the Rethinking Grading initiative that requires cultural shifts, in terms of what might be a different practice than what's been used in the classroom in the past, even emphasizing specific skills like research might force different teaching methodologies. From your perspective, how has that gone? How has it been received, and what were some of the successful strategies in shifting that culture for people to embrace a new approach?
Yeah. So one of the great things about this grant is the other 4 schools that got it as well. The other 4 people in my position, we are able to meet and talk about what we're doing. We each kind of have different plans, but kind of working together. And we all agreed very early on that even though the grant is called Rethinking Grading, just to keep it such a focus on grading itself wouldn't be beneficial. I mean, if you give a kid an A, you give a kid a 90, what does it really mean? Like, is it actually showing how much they know? Not necessarily. So at my school, one of the things we decided to do, which took a lot of planning, is we decided to, if we're a college prep school, let's try to model our school, our high school schedule after colleges. So one of the things that I was able to accomplish was that we now have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and a Tuesday, Thursday schedule, which mimics the college setting. The kids, one of the things that we also moved away from is we used to be on the cohort model. So the students would be in the same group with the same kids moving to the same class all day, every day. And for some kids who've been there since kindergarten, they've been with the same 25 kids for 13 years, which is not great for a multitude of reasons. Behavioral, they get sick of each other. They learn, some good things, some bad things. So in changing our schedule, one of the other things we did is we broke up all of the cohorts. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have science labs that we changed the schedule. So there's 6 periods, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 on Tuesdays, Thursdays. So that's an hour and 20 minutes as opposed to the 50-minute class, so that we could have labs. And this also kind of opened up our schedule to offer electives, which before all we had were AP classes. So students, once they became seniors, they were just thrown into AP classes, whether they belonged there or not. Some of them didn't have a choice. If they wanted to take AP Lit, they'd be in 3 AP classes because that's the only way the schedule works. So instead, we're giving the students more choice and a little bit more equity, so that, if you want to go into this class, if this is the area of focus that you're looking at moving towards college or whatever comes next, you should be able to kind of pick and choose as you need. This year went okay. Obviously, the first year you roll something out like that, it has some bumps in the road. But so far, received by the teachers and students was really well. Especially the students who've been there for a long time are very happy to be with different kids throughout the day. And one of the biggest things we were able to do, especially with the electives, was to make them mixed grade level, so that it's not just a freshman class. It's not just a senior class. You can have 9th graders with 12th graders in the same group learning about the same stuff. And that has been really great from a management standpoint, because, those freshmen who are sometimes very immature don't want to be super immature in front of the seniors, and the seniors who are, too cool for school, they kind of keep the freshmen in line and will say things that, not teacher can't necessarily say and get the result that you're looking for. So there's been some, benefit there to kind of help. So, that was kind of one of the biggest things we did, was just changing the actual structure of the school. And, I heard, Magda talking about the time of day, and, that absolutely went into it as well. We have, seniors, they're habitually late. They're, driving themselves or coming in later. So are they going to get the same level of learning in their first period class? Probably not, because that's one they're going to be missing most time from. So what's going to go there that can be something where they're still going to get education out of it, but at the same time, it's not going to hurt them for being a typical 17, 18-year-old kid. So we had to play around with that a lot. So that was kind of one of the first pieces of the puzzle. The second piece of what we were doing is we wanted to kind of rethink, what is the model, the pedagogical model in the classroom. The standard model, teacher driven. Teacher does everything. The students write, take notes, take tests. That works for some kids. It absolutely works for some, doesn't work for others. One of our teachers in the language department, Dr. John Parker, started last year running a pilot where he kind of shifted the focus. Instead, he taught his classes where the first couple weeks are giving the kids the tools, how to access the information that you need, where to go to find it online, how to use the dictionaries. He's a Latin and a Greek teacher, how to use the dictionaries. And then he would give the kids their assignments, put them in groups. Here it is, you go, you figure it out. Assign each other roles, work as well as you need to, who needs to do what, just develop leadership roles. And he would give them 2 grades, one on the actual work they produced, which is, the content. But the second was on these transferable skills. How was your collaboration? Did you choose good group mates? Were you able to articulate what you actually did at the end of it? And he would give them feedback on that, narrative feedback. And then instead of saying, okay, you only did a 75% translation, instead of saying, go back and fix these mistakes, instead it's, okay, we're going to leverage the grade. You can keep that 75 if you do nothing. But on the next assignment, if you take all this advice that I just gave you as far as these transferable skills go, you're showing me that you can do what you need to do in the first place. That 75 can go up to an 85 or a 95, depending on how much you're doing. So it's kind of leveraging that past work without having to go back and revisit it just for the sake of redoing it once the mistakes have been pointed out. And it's showing improvement as they move. And so that's what we did last year. This year, what we decided to do was expand that. We got volunteers from one of each department, math, English, history, science, and Dr. Parker kept with the languages, to see if this was a model that could work in all subject matters. One of the most important things that we did is we didn't want this to be a top-down initiative. as all of us know, working in schools, initiative fatigue is very real. It seems like every year before you even see an initiative through, there's 2 or 3 new ones, which is just a lot more work to do that may or may not be good, may or may not actually see it till its end before there's something new. So instead, we kind of was like, this is on you. If you want to, be part of this, we're going to give you the training. We're going to walk you through it. We're going to give you documentation. We developed common language. We developed common rubrics for everything. And we had them have a pilot group and a control group so that we could take data. And so far, one of the things that we're seeing is that it's working. Our students who are traditionally C and D level students are getting Bs because we're kind of taking away that compliance grading, which, that's a huge chunk of management is, did you do the activator? Did you hand in, this? Instead, we're looking at kind of the end product as being a little bit more important. One of the downsides is some of our kids who are traditionally getting, high A's, take away that compliance piece, they're getting 80s as well, showing probably more realistic what a student's knowledge base is. Because once again, you're not getting the zeros for not doing what you weren't supposed to be doing, but you're also not getting the bonus points for the fluff that's just kind of filling in the time for management's sake. So we're getting a much more clear picture of what we're doing and where our students are at. And moving forward, our goal next year is to kind of open it up to the high school, not mandatory, because once again, we're a college prep. Every college teacher teaches differently. We want them to be exposed to as many different learning styles as possible. But if this is something that can work, and it takes a lot of the pressure off the teacher, because no longer are they the driving force behind every lesson, they're becoming the facilitator. And their job then is the students are kind of teaching each other through the tools that they've been taught. And then the teacher then is just kind of working with the groups or with the students, focusing them on what needs to happen. So that's kind of what we've been doing over the past 2 years.
Just a little. That
Yeah.
was amazing. I feel like we just got a full TED talk there, and I mean that in the most positive, complimentary way. That was such a rich explanation of what you're all doing. I want to pull out one thing real quick, and then Cam, I'm going to come to you with it, which is using college as sort of a model for what you're doing, not just in terms of the practical sense of how you're scheduling things, but a little bit of marketing there. I think sometimes when we talk about restructuring or rethinking our education in order to better serve student needs, there's this knee-jerk reaction that we're sacrificing quality, that if we're not skilling and drilling on essential core academic subjects, we're losing something. And, and saying, no, like look at higher education or other models that can pursue rigorous learning. That's what we're trying to sort of build students up to. Which sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was one of the points. We wanted to move to that college model, which did take away time on learning per subject, allowed us to put electives in there. But one of the main reasons we did that is our school, and I know many schools love to brag about high college acceptance rate. But one of the things that we don't have great data on, because it's hard to get it, but we have it anecdotally, how many of our kids don't last in college for a year or 2 years? They end up dropping out for a while or taking that gap year. Are we, and especially being a college prep model, are we truly setting them up for success? Might graduate with a 4.0 GPA, but are they ready for that difference in learning structure that's happening? Whereas we feel if we can model that early on, it's going to be more like this, then that'll set them up better in the long run.
Yeah. Right. So Cam, we mentioned college, and I have an idea of something that might help with persistence at the college level, but, would love to hear your perspective on the early college work you're doing, but also, if you don't mind, we've talked about people and specifically educators. We've talked about time. With early college, you have to deal with place, at its base, different designs vary, but you have 2 different places that have to be able to work together. So can you talk a little bit about early college, the work you're doing, and how you're addressing sort of issues of place and where learning happens?
Absolutely, I'm happy to. And I think that's exactly right, Chad, about early college really confronting place head on, especially as it relates to a lot of our first generation college goers, students who might be underrepresented in college. So as I talked about a little bit earlier, early college sort of very intentionally breaks down that silo between high school and college, right? So what if we look at this as a continuum from 9th grade through 14th or 16th grade, or whatever it takes to get that student ready to enter the workforce and find their way to a family sustaining career. So students are, staying within the sort of confines and supportive atmosphere of their high school while also taking some risks with their education, trying some things they might not otherwise have been comfortable with. So as you said, models vary, but this is all about a college and a high school coming together, bringing the faculty together with the high school instructors and saying what is going to be best for these students in terms of getting them the learning they need, but also getting them that exposure to college, how it feels, what it's like to be there. And I think that's the part of early college that really confronts place most directly. We talk to students a lot about their early college experiences, and students talk a lot about the learning they did and how they feel good about their academics. But what they talk about the most is getting onto the college campus, eating in the dining hall with other college students, sitting in a college lecture course with a bunch of other college students, and sort of seeing themselves as that college student who can succeed in this place that otherwise might have felt intimidating or daunting or like they didn't belong there. And I think that is the part of early college that speaks to us as really powerful, as students get that acculturation in addition to the academics. And I think there's a second piece that really comes out when we think about early college as well, which is getting students opportunities to take some of those electives that John was just talking about, right? Try some courses that are a little bit different from your general education courses. Try some things that might relate to a major that you think you might be interested in, right? Better for students to identify that actually maybe journalism wasn't their favorite thing when they're a junior in high school as opposed to as a sophomore in college, right? So doing some of that self-discovery work that I certainly did when I was an undergrad, and being able to do so with the support and the mentorship that comes along with the early college program. And so really taking that, getting students on campus, that getting them out of the high school and into a new place, and then this career connected learning piece, right? Sort of focusing students on, here's some of the things you might be able to do as you move into college, here's some of the things you might be able to major in, and here's some interesting possibilities for your future, and having them to be able to try out all of those options and identify what works for them. And I think, when we talk to students, they remark on a lot on these courses that they took, trying out, science labs, or trying out a photography course, or just trying out these sort of creative pursuits that they might not otherwise be able to get in the school building due to the sort of structure of the traditional high school education. And that's a big part of, I think, why we believe early college has been really powerful, especially, as I said, for those first generation students who might not have a lot of college knowledge in the home. So really appreciate that focus on place and think it's at the center of how early college works.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And you clearly articulated well as how it can empower students to have voice and agency in their own learning, which I'm sure goes a long way as well. I want to open up a question to everyone, which is about technology. And really, that's the question. I think that, it's been not in the far too distant past, we used to sort of wave technology off as like, oh, it's a tool, it's helpful, but it's like anything else, like a textbook. And I think we've reached a point where technology is fundamentally reshaping the way we navigate the world, the relationships we build, really sort of the basic fabric of our society, which begs the question of how are you seeing technology play out in your own settings, the good and the bad, and what is the potential for becoming a resource to drive thoughts about rethinking our approach to teaching and learning? Any thoughts? John, go ahead.
So obviously the big one, AI, is definitely reshaping the way in which things have to be done. As an English teacher, I obviously see the negatives of it, with students passing off work as their own when they haven't done it, which has caused our school to invest in turn it in to kind of figure out and make sure they're doing that. But at the same time, the useful and beneficial nature of it, that students can put their work in and ask for advice back of how to formulate this, how to do this, write all about themselves. How would I then write a, college letter based on all this stuff about myself? So there's tons of beneficial things that are there. It's kind of one of the things that we need to do is kind of teach them how to use it responsibly, and then how to, go through and actually look at what it's giving you, what it's saying. Can you explain it? Do you know what it means? Do you know what's happening there? But also, like I said, on that English front, making sure the kids have the skills to be able to do it themselves, were they without technology in the first place, which more and more kids are kind of trying as they can to, take that shortcut, because a lot of students, they will take that path of least resistance. So that's definitely one of the areas that's big. Another area, to go along with what Cameron was talking about in electives, our school has made use of Edgenuity, which is great for it's an online lessons, basically student driven. Kids sign on, do all the work at a computer. It allows us to do credit recovery for students who may have failed in the past during the school day, but also allows us to offer courses that we don't have at our school. So they can go into a room with other students, with a teacher that's in there, and take a course that we otherwise would not be able to offer them, that's completely online, and allows, once again, students who have interests that lie beyond what we can do, we're able to kind of give them that piece that helps them figure out, do they like this? Is this a passion? Is this going to help them for whatever college choice they have to go to? So that part is huge and wonderful as well.
Yes. So I want to point out from the early childhood perspective, which is completely opposite. And, of course, we want to limit the time that children spend with screen times is a little bit more, for example, Families First, we have the Power Parenting, which is a 12-week sessions. And one of our sessions is talking to parents about the impact of the media in the brain development and how it's impacted social, emotionally, our kids and mental health. So it is, I agree with John, it's just so many good things with technology and so many things that really can even vision with the kids need to have, so there's a lot of things. So for us, technology in early childhood, again, is more really telling, especially families, about the impact of the brain, the media and the brain, the technology, the cell phone. However, it's an incredible tool when we think, for example, in regards of communication between teachers and families. With COVID-19, we learned so much about Zoom, and parents learned to use Zoom and having classes. So it has been an incredible tool to extend the learning at home, to build relationships with families and schools. But also there are so many use of technology, specifically about the use of translation languages with this artificial intelligence. It's sometimes scary, but now that we have so many families, immigrants from many other backgrounds that needs different languages, technology can really help us to build better tools and resources to have services within, childcare, early childhood and school too. But for us, it's a little more cautious, the technology at early years.
I'd love to jump into it's a early childhood classroom in first grade, so it's like the tail end of the early childhood years. It's sort of that it's been a very long, shift, seeing kids being more inundated with technology and sort of access to technology in their lives. But really where it sort of blew up, it was during the pandemic, of course. And seeing how that very early exposure to technology and the ability to sort of navigate when I'm trying to teach online, and kids are able to just very quickly shift to YouTube or to Roblox, and to sort of have that be a constant battle, sort of that savvy that they have, and then trying to introduce it into the curriculum can sometimes become more of just a management thing of like, okay, are you on learning apps? Are you doing, the things they're supposed to be doing? And I think that it's just been such a slow build, and to see, it's curious to see how some of these kids who have been growing up with technology are now in college and high school, and to see what that learning impact has been fascinating to watch. Also a little bit scary too. I think that it can be such a helpful tool, especially in sort of keeping track of what kids have been accomplishing over their years of education, and having that be a hard and fast, document that they can, the teachers can access, and sort of seeing where their students are. But yeah, the technology in the early childhood years has definitely shifted my job over, the 20 years I've been teaching. Definitely is very different now than it was before.
Yeah, Chad, and I would just quickly say, as it relates to technology and sort of how it connects to early college, I think you know, so much of the conversation around technology in early college is about place again, right? Where are students doing their learning? And I think we see around the state a handful of programs that are trying out virtual and hybrid models, and particularly to be able to reach communities in rural places, or just places where there's not a college campus nearby, where transportation is a real barrier. And so I think the technology piece is opening up a lot of opportunities for a lot of access where there might not have previously been any. And of course, we want to be careful to be sure that we're understanding the ways in which virtual learning is really valuable, and also the ways that we might lose something in there, right? If there's just sort of learning loss on academics, or if we're losing part of the value that I talked about earlier in terms of getting students on campus, getting them acculturated. So, you know, I think as given how young early college is in Massachusetts, we still have a lot to learn. But I do think that technology is sort of fundamentally changing the landscape in terms of what's possible in terms of access for students. And it's going to be fascinating over the next few years to see what we learn about how technology is really changing the early college space specifically.
No, thank you. And I really appreciate all four of you looking at both sides of the issue. And I certainly agree that, I mean, there's obvious reasons to be concerned about sort of use of technology, and not just in the classroom, but sort of exposure to things on social media and what have you. We've seen some of the connections between activity on social media and students' mental health. And it's additionally challenging, right, when really maybe for the first time it's very clear that young people are often ahead of adults in their learning curve of how to use these things. On the flip side, like, what are the potential to sort of look at those root issues for rethinking education that technology can fundamentally shift, like resource sharing, this idea that resources aren't limited to your community or operations. You know, John, I think about sort of the cohort modeling that you're doing for your students, so they can shift throughout the course of the week or the year and sort of what their learning opportunities are, and, you know, handing that over to a system that can do that efficiently for you, just to free up teachers to actually teach, you know, things like that sort of speaks to the potential. All right, we're coming up on time, and so I want to leave you with one. It's that last big question. I apologize for kind of putting you on a job interview, but, you know, would love to hear, given your experiences, and we're talking about rethinking education, you know, what advice or push would you give to fellow educators, administrators, state policymakers, of things that they should really be focused on and think about changing when it comes to improving our educational system? You know, if you're doing something like rethinking grading, don't be shy about going back to it. That's totally fine. But we'd love to say, you know, what is something that you would push people on if we want to improve our system? I'll open it up. Whoever wants to go first.
I can jump in with just really sort of giving more opportunity for teachers to come to the table and to sort of bring their experiences first, to sort of show exactly what is happening in classrooms. I think that sort of opening up that idea of the classroom doesn't need to look the same. I think that really is the key thing. Really understanding that when you're going to do right for teachers, that is going to end up supporting the students that you are so desperately trying to support and to help them sort of get ready for life. So really sort of understanding that listening to teachers, putting teachers and sustaining teachers is going to ultimately be best for the students.
Yeah, one of the big things that I think is super important is that we need to listen to the research. There's so much research out there that says what needs to happen to make things better, and for some reason we do the exact opposite. You know, high school, they say kids should start later. All the research basically says it's better for them. Younger kids start earlier. It's better. We do the exact opposite. We know that smaller class sizes leads to better results, yet there's a constant push where class sizes are typical to be at about 30 or more. Like my biggest class was 36 at one point. That if we're going to be able to bring those down, smaller class sizes, you need to have more teachers, which means you need to make more funding available and actually pay teachers, better, which is a big thing. And then the last thing, there needs to be a plan for student management. I know a lot of schools right now are struggling as far as one student can hijack an entire classroom and the learning environment that is supposed to be taking place. And as what is allowed for schools to do as far as managing behavior is making it more difficult to give the education that all of the students deserve, when so much focus then goes down onto one or two students who absolutely have a right to an education, but at the same time are stealing that from everybody else. There needs to be a better plan in place for that. I don't have the answers for that one, but I do know that leads to quite a bit of fatigue for both teachers and administration and for the students in general.
I think there is an urgency. We desperately need to, like you say, more than 100 years, having a similar system and structure in education. This is overdue. And I think we need to be together to really change, especially for the historically marginalized students. They're still falling behind. Latinx students are falling behind. When you're looking at the research, we're not doing a good job. And I think so this is critical. First of all, we need to know to say, oh, we wanted to do this. It sounds like something good to do. We really definitely, especially after this report, Chad, we need to really push people who are making policies and decisions to look at this in a critical way. Budget is critical. It's just distribution of funding. And we need to look, we have good funding there. Where are we putting the money, where the money is going? Of course, we need to think about mental health in general, the mental health of our teachers, and look at the jobs that they have and how to make this teacher, teaching something, again, exciting. A lot of the teachers enter the field excited. They want to be teachers. And then after 2 or 3 years, they're thinking about a new career because it's not sustainable to think about that type of demanding of a job. From the family engagement, when it's very sad, because I think families can really bring capacity to the schools if you think creatively. It's not only about the teacher job, but it's how can we welcome communities and people to bring capacity. But there are no funding for that. When I sometimes look at the funding to engage families, they only can offer sometimes pizza because they don't have any money, or sometimes they even don't have money to do childcare. They don't have money to offer food. And we think that, for example, in one of the meetings that we have with discussion, we talk about the critical importance of building relationships with the students and with the families. But if we don't have a funding to invite families of our schools, we don't have funding to pay them to bring their voices, how are we going to change something? So I really think we need to, it's more about the budget at the policy level, how we are distributing the money and the things that are critical. And following on Emma, we need to start bringing the teachers and the families, the people who are directly impacted by education, and let them really help us to guide the changes versus from the top down. And I think if we are working together, hopefully we can do something different. That's a little bit my contribution, but a lot of work to do.
Yeah, Chad, it's a great question. And I think from my perspective, I would love to see the state continue to redouble its efforts on pathway programs. I think that from my perspective, we talk to a lot of students whose lives have been changed by their opportunity to try something a little bit different and a little bit new. And within that, I think, really just a focus on the students who are most underserved at this point by the system. I was at your Condition of Education Western Mass event and was just very compelled by the conversation around chronic absenteeism in particular. And we just know a lot of the communities that serve a lot of historically underrepresented students are suffering devastating levels of absenteeism. And it's really hard to get students to where they want to be if they're not in the building. So focusing on, sort of the whole child, right? That's academic support, but also social emotional support, making sure that we have the sort of resources and supports in schools so that students who are traditionally not succeeding in our schools can have the best opportunity to succeed. And that's a big catch-all sort of recommendation. I understand that, but I think just maintaining our focus on equity is going to be an important guidepost as we move forward as a system and focusing on a systems level. on those students who need the support the most feels really important from my perspective.
Right. Thank you, Cam. Well, I really appreciate all of you again for your time with us and sharing your insights and your expertise, ending us on a positive note, because I know the big question can go to what we need to fix, is that when we think about how to bring more funding into the system, how to ensure that students are engaged and have a sense of belonging within their learning settings, that we value and understand the role of the teacher. The work that you all are doing, and I say that not just as a compliment, but to encourage anyone who's watching this video to go check out in greater depth the work that you all are doing, are strong building blocks to move the system forward to address that. And so I appreciate that work and thank you for your time.